This whole thing kicked off because of something that just completely blindsided me. I'd always assumed that Texas Instruments was the standard calculator for school. Turns out, for a huge chunk of the world, I was totally, completely wrong. For them, it's always been Casio. So yeah, it all started with a comment from a viewer, a guy named Dylan. He kind of called out a very American-centric blind spot I had. And man, it opened my eyes to this massive cultural divide that I had no idea even existed. And this was the comment from Dylan that just stuck with me. But here's the thing, he wasn't the only one. All of a sudden, people from literally all over the world started jumping in, saying, yep, same here. It was clear we were talking about two parallel universes when it comes to calculators.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly, right? If you grew up in America, that column on the left is probably your entire reality. But then we heard from people in Germany, France, Australia, Thailand, Hong Kong, you name it, and they all said the same thing. Casio is king. It really made me wonder, how did Casio get this big?
Well, to get that answer, we have to go back, way back, to a small workshop in post-World War II Japan. And this isn't just a corporate history, really, it's a family story about a man named Tadao Casio and his three younger brothers. So their first big hit, you'd think it was some piece of high-tech gear, right? Nope, it was this, the Yubiwa pipe. See, back in post-war Japan, everything was scarce, including cigarettes. This little ring was a clever invention that let you smoke a cigarette right down to the bitter end without burning your fingers. It sounds so simple, but it was a smash hit, and the money they made from it, well, that funded their real. The brothers were looking at the calculators of the time, these big, clunky, mechanical things with gears and cranks, and they had this wild idea. What if we could build one that was completely electric? No gears to jam, no noisy cranks, just pure, silent electronic calculation. It was a seriously bold move.
And let me tell you, it was not easy. They spent 7 straight years on this project. Just think about that for a second. In the world of tech, 7 years is an absolute eternity. They poured every bit of their time and all that money from the little cigarette ring into this one single-minded mission.
And it was no smooth ride either. 6 years into this thing, they hit a brick wall. They realized their whole design just wasn't going to work for mass production. A lot of people would have just thrown in the towel right there, but not the Casio brothers. They pivoted, they switched to the super reliable relay technology that was being used in telephone switchboards, and just a year later, they nailed it.
Okay, so after 7 years of grinding, of pouring their hearts into this, what did this revolutionary machine actually look like? You're probably picturing something maybe the size of a typewriter or a big old cash register.
No, get this. It was the desk. The entire piece of furniture was the calculator. It's funny, when you see photos, you think that little console on top is the machine, but nope, the whole thing was the calculator. Compact, I guess, meant something a little different back then. But here's the key takeaway. This machine, the Casio 14A, was their big break. It was tough, it didn't have gears that could get stuck, and it absolutely put them on the map. In fact, this success is what officially launched the Casio Computer Company, all the way back in 1957.
But this is where the story gets really wild. They didn't just become the calculator guys. They used that initial win as a launchpad to dive headfirst into all kinds of other consumer electronics. Boom! 1974, they dropped the Casiotron. And just like that, they're in the digital watch business, a market that, let's be honest, they would eventually come to dominate.
Then only 6 years later, they do it again. The Casio Tone 201 wasn't for professional musicians. It was for the rest of us. It made electronic keyboards affordable and accessible to absolutely everyone. By the end of the 80s, more than half of all electronic instruments sold in the US were made by Casio.
Insane.
And then, 1983, they unleash a cultural icon, the G-Shock, a watch so ridiculously tough it became a legend. This is what cemented their place, not just as a calculator company, but as a true giant in consumer electronics. All right, so that's the history. But what about now? What does the Casio empire actually look like today? The numbers are kind of surprising, and honestly, they perfectly explain that whole calculator divide we started with. So first thing you got to see is this. A massive 85% of their business, it's all consumer stuff. We're talking about the watches, the calculators, the keyboards. That's their bread and butter. But here's the million-dollar question. Inside that huge consumer slice, what do you think is their #1 seller? Given their history, you'd probably guess calculators, right? Or maybe keyboards after their huge success?
It is watches. And folks, it's not even a competition. A jaw-dropping 50% of Casio's total sales comes from watches alone. By revenue, they are a watch company. First and foremost, that is their biggest success by a country mile.
And this chart, this is the one that brings it all full circle. Just look at where they sell their stuff. More than half of all their sales are in Japan and the rest of Asia. North America, we're only about 13% of their business. This is why, for so many people around the globe, Casio is the default. They are just a much, much bigger deal everywhere else. You know, through this whole insane journey, from a little smoking ring to a global electronics powerhouse, there has been one constant, one thread tying it all together, the family at its heart. And this is what I find just amazing. Look at this continuity. Their own father was the first president. Then the founding brothers, Tadao and later Casio, ran the company for decades. And today, the president is Kazuhiro Casio, the son of one of the original four brothers. The family that started it all is still guiding it today. So let's circle back to where we started. When I began this, if you said Casio, I just picture a calculator that wasn't a Texas Instruments. But now, I see a desk that is a calculator, an indestructible watch, a keyboard for beginners, and four brothers who spent 7 years chasing a crazy idea. What about you?